Hey everyone, I'm Jen, and you're watching another episode of Suncrest On Demand. Before we go any further, I'm sure someone is watching your first Suncrest On Demand video. I'm super excited that you're here. So help me help you. Text the word Suncrest to 94,000. When you do that, we'll send you a digital gift card directly to your phone for some coffee, simply for getting this far in the video. Now, here's a tip for everyone watching. Make sure you have the Suncrest app. When you use our app, you get insider access to things like past content, upcoming events, stuff to help you, your kids, and your students engage with their faith journey, and much more. Actually, if you're looking to take a next step in your own faith journey right now, our app is the best tool to use. You can find the Next Steps button right on the homepage. Take a look right now to sign up for baptism, join a group to find your people here at Suncrest, or join serving team and make a difference. In our app and on our website, you can also partner with us financially. Your generosity makes a huge difference in Northwest Indiana and beyond through starting new churches. So on behalf of all of us, thank you for using your finances to change lives. Here's how the rest of this video is going to go. We're going to experience some music. In fact, let us know a lyric you found meaningful in the live chat or the comments. We're going to experience communion. Each week, we focus on the sacrificial love of Jesus through a simple meal. So, now's the time to gather some food and drink to represent Jesus' body and blood. After the song is done, I'm going to put a timer on the screen. Feel free to eat and drink when you're ready. After communion is done, we'll listen to this week's message. Once that's done, let us know something meaningful you heard in the live chat or comments. Let's get going.
I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? It was my tomb till I met you. I was breathing but not alive. All my failures I tried to hide. It was my tomb till I met you. You called was heavy, but chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan. Now you call me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing. Now your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes are open. 'Cause when you call my name, I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day.
I want to ask you a question to start. It's not one of these 5. What if you could predict your future? Would you like that? Would you not like that? Would you like to know where life is going? What would you aim at in predicting your future? What if you could predict your future? Now, because I talk to people all the time about real life things, whether it's in my office or in the commons area or at the grocery store when I run into you, I find that sometimes people get remarkably close to predicting their future. And the reason that I know this is very commonly I hear a phrase come out of people's mouths. It's probably a phrase that you have used. It's definitely a phrase that I have used. It goes something like this. I should have seen it coming. I should have seen it coming. We almost, after the fact, think, I should have been able to predict. I should have been able to see the future. I should have seen it coming. Now, while some of you are so healthy that you are able to see things coming in your own lives, the one gift that actually all of us have, healthy or not, is that a lot of times we see things coming in other people's lives that they do not see for themselves. It goes something like this. You should have seen it coming. You should have seen it coming. And don't we talk to people all the time and we're perplexed by how naive they were in approaching a particular situation. They're like, I can't believe he broke up with me. And you're like, he's been breaking up with you for 3 months. Have you not been watching the choices that he's been making? You say something like, I can't believe that I've gained all this weight. I can't believe that I'm in this much debt. I can't believe that I got an F on the test. I can't believe that she's pregnant. And in all of these situations, you're like, those were perfectly predictable. All the time when you were on your way there, you were making choices and decisions that led you there, and for some reason, you couldn't see it coming. Now, isn't this fascinating? That many, many times, you can see things coming in other people's lives, and they can see things coming in your life. And if we're honest, sometimes we actually see things coming in our own lives, but we choose to close our eyes. Maybe life actually is predictable. You know, it's not always negative things. It's not always fails or regrets. Some of you have quite successfully been able to predict your future. You are, in many areas of your life, exactly where you wanted to be. And the way that you ended up there was that you aimed at something in life, and then you made consistent decisions that were in alignment with that aim. You did not allow yourself to get distracted. You did not allow yourself to get thwarted. You did not allow yourself, when you were tired, to give up. You kept making decisions in accomplishment of that aim. It was actually Abraham Lincoln who said, the best way to predict the future is to create it. But I think if Honest Abe wanted to refine his statement just a little bit, it's more than just creating it. A lot of people have a dream. A lot of people have intentions. A lot of people have a vision, maybe you. But they don't end up where they wanted to be. And when you reverse engineer it, what you find is where you end up in life is a culmination of your decisions. So this is the thesis for the next 5 weeks. It goes something like this. Good questions lead to good decisions, and good decisions lead to a good life. Now, I know this is very simple, and you might think, Greg, it's a little too simple. You're probably right. But I want us to think just conceptually with this for a moment and reverse engineer it ourselves. All of us would like to end up with a good life. You could even just choose your definition of whatever a good life is. A good life, I mean, surely is a quality life, a healthy life, a happy life, I hope a godly life. That's a good life. And one of the interesting things about when you live a good life or I live a good life, it's actually usually good for the people around us too. But if we end up off the rails and are frustrated and do not end up in a good life, a lot of times the pain of our life, the difficulty of our life actually spreads to others as well. This is the principle, the scriptural principle of you will reap what you sow. If you ask good questions to make good decisions, you generally end up with a good life. Now, the caveat in all of that spiritually, in the way that God tells us the world is to say, when things are working right, what you reap is what you sow. But we all know that we live in a broken world. And sometimes there are circumstances that are not of your choosing that throw you off from your path. But here's what I want to suggest to you, is that the good life is not the perfect life. It's not the life that worked out exactly like you wanted to. Many times the definition of the good life is even when I hit a roadblock, when I ran into something that was not of my doing, when I came across a problem that nobody could have seen coming, then I decided in response to that situation that was unfair or unpredictable, I decided how I would handle that. And that decision actually led to a healthy life. But this good life is all built in the idea of our good decisions. Maybe the metaphor for us all over the next 5 weeks should be a decision is almost like the steering wheel of your life. You control it. You choose to turn left or to turn right. You get to decide which way your life goes. And there's all kinds of factors, influences that will shape you in choosing whether to turn left or turn right or go straight or back this thing up. But if you get underneath that and say, okay, well, how do you decide? How do you know whether to turn right or to turn left? I think the ancient wisdom of the scriptures is let the right questions guide you. And that's what we're going to explore over the next 5 weeks. Something very powerful happens. The Apostle Paul writes it like this. He says, what you have decided in your heart. He says there's a decision-making ability inside of everyone that goes beyond just a cognitive or mental calculation. It's more than just data in and data out. It actually has a conviction level that moves the 12 inches from your brain down to your heart and says, you made a decision that you will follow through on. And when you decide something in your heart, that can change everything. Now, this is what I know about you and I know about me. All of us have a decision-making filter. We all have one. We have different ones, but we all make our decisions based on different factors or basis. And one of the simplest ways to think about it, and many people are very simple in the way they do this, is they think in their mind, I'm going for max something. Now, the person you're sitting next to is maybe going for something different than you're going for. So many times when people make decisions, they say, I'm going for max happiness. That's maybe the most common one. I just want to be happy. And then I run all my decisions through the grid of, will it make me happy or not? Other people say, I'm going for max peace. I just want a peaceful life. I want peaceful relationships, and it will cause you sometimes to make good decisions, sometimes to make bad decisions in trying to keep things peaceful. Some people are like, happiness? No. Peace? No. I'm going for max progress. I want to go for, and I'll tell you, if you ever have a person who's going for max peace, married to a person who's going for max progress, you will be in counseling if you're smart. Otherwise, you'll get divorced. And I don't know what your grid is. Maybe your grid is max integrity. Maybe your grid is max impact. I'm trying to change the world. But almost all of us have a defining thing that guides most of our decisions. But what I want to lay out to you over the next 5 weeks is to say, hey, let's not maybe make it that simple. Let's lean into some more sophisticated questions, because one size doesn't fit all in our decision making. And this is a verse from the ancient wisdom of Solomon and Proverbs that I'll probably use every week. I just think it's kind of the verse for us to stick with. So here's what it says. The prudent see danger and take refuge. So there's a kind of person who looks at situations. When they look at the situation, they actually step back for a moment. That's what prudent people do. They step back. They don't just drive forward. They assess, they reflect, they look at what's there, and if they see danger, they definitely don't turn toward the danger. But not everybody does that. And maybe the story of your life is that you haven't done that, because the simple just keep going, and they pay the penalty. And the whole idea behind the simple here is the naive, the bull in the china shop, the one who can't let off the gas, the one who's chasing happiness or nobility or impact or peace or progress or whatever. Like, they just have one thing they're aiming at and they just go. But that almost always leaves you in a place where you pay the penalty. And this is the heartbreak of my life. Is that I see good people, even godly people, smart people, make dumb decisions. And they pay the price for it, because that's the way the world works. I have a very good friend who's in AA. I have so much respect for him that he would step into AA and go on this journey of recovery. The truth is, most of us probably belong in some kind of recovery program like that. Don't ever look at that program and label it as those people, because those people are us. Those are just people who have had the courage, I think, to end up there. But he did tell me, he said, usually the way you end up in AA isn't that you decided. You didn't decide to go to AA. He said, usually it's either your liver or your lover or your lawyer that caused you to go to AA. And then in the recovery world, including AA, one of the most foundational principles to reset and move through to a different kind of life is the principle of I will devote rigorous honesty to my life. I will no longer tell stories that aren't true. I will no longer exaggerate for effect. I will no longer justify the decisions that I was making that led me here. I will approach this with rigorous honesty. And that actually leads us to the first of the 5 questions, the one that we'll explore with the rest of our time. This is what I call the integrity question. And the question is simply this: am I being honest with myself? Let's just all say this question out loud together. If you're watching online, say it right where you are. Let's say it together. Am I being honest with myself? Now, the only way for this question to actually have its full effect on us is to add one word to it at the end. And that is the word really. Am I being honest with myself? Really? Because this first integrity question that asks, am I being honest with myself? If you'll explore it, will save you from so much regret and set you on the course. See, here's a sad truth. You have talked yourself into every bad decision you've ever made. The reason I know that you've done that is because the same story is true of me. Not all my decisions have been great. Some have been poor and bad. And who is the common denominator in all of my bad decisions? I am. Who's the common denominator in all of your bad decisions? You are. And one of the things that we should pay attention to is that inside each of us, this is the whole nature of a decision, is that you have the chance to decide, and many times you have 2 or more conflicting things, possibilities, directions this could go. And so there is a conversation going on in your own mind. And you could almost imagine that inside your own mind, there's a version of you that I'll call the salesperson. And this person is selling you on the decision that you're about to make. And we've all heard the whispers of this salesperson. You deserve it. You need it. It'll be fun. You're missing out. The salesperson. It's this salesperson that is in your mind that has caused all of you, all of us, to make every bad decision that we've ever made. And if we just start to own that, if we could just be honest, really, then we could just start to say, yeah, I bought it. I smoked it. I drank it. I slept with her. I. And I don't say this at all to get you into a cycle of guilt or shame. It's just a moment of a reality check that actually has a promise of something on the other side. Because when the salesman in your mind goes to selling, he or she will use tactics on you that are the most manipulative of all salespeople. If you were actually buying a car or buying anything else from one of these salespeople, you would look at them and say, I want no part of that. What are you, a manipulator? But we listen to ourselves. We don't have to. Jesus actually said this: the truth will set you free. And so we ask, I'm asking you to first of 5 questions to guide your life. To begin with this integrity question of, am I being honest with myself? Really? Am I taking responsibility for myself? Am I taking responsibility for my part in the situation? Am I owning what is there? Am I being honest with myself really? And if you can get to this place of rigorous honesty, as my friends in AA know, it is the path, the only path actually, to freedom, just like Jesus said. But of course, this is harder than it looks. You've probably heard the phrase confirmation bias. That phrase has been used now for probably 6 decades in psychological assessments in the Western world. But long before that, there was actually an English philosopher named Sir Francis Bacon. Maybe some of you have heard of him. Fascinating guy. He's actually the father of the scientific method. And he truly thought that when we look at situations in the world and when we look at situations in our life, we ought to come back and just be honest. And this is one of the quotes. He lived in about the year 1600, so this is his English on this. He said, "The human understanding, when it has once adopted an opinion," okay, you've adopted an opinion, you have a perspective, you think something, "it then draws all things else to support and agree with it." You have an opinion, it could be about anything. It could be about politics, it could be about sports, it could be about your job, it could be about the future. You have an opinion about it, and then you start to scan the landscape for things that agree with your opinion, data that you can backfill to support that opinion. And the moment that you do that, it stops becoming a truth quest. No longer are we looking for honesty, we're only looking to support the opinion that I already believed. And though there be a greater number and weight of instances to be found on the other side, yet these it either neglects or despises, or by some distinction sets aside or rejects. All the data that's out there that disagrees with your opinion or your observation is shoved off to the side, is immediately disregarded. Sometimes you want to aim and say, oh, it's not a credible source or whatever. But trust me, we all live in 2021 in America, right? We all know this happens all the time. But even before Sir Francis Bacon, actually in the year about 700 BC, there's a fascinating storyline in the Old Testament that leads up to the birth of Christ that actually speaks to how this is wired into our humanity. Let me tell you a little story here. At this time, there were 2 different kingdoms that made up the Israelites. There was the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. The southern kingdom was Judah. Each one of them had their own king. And you don't need to remember all this, but capture this storyline. The king at this time was Jehoiakim. And Jehoiakim was the king over the country of Judah. And basically, he was paying a really big fee to Babylon, in particular to Nebuchadnezzar, who was the king of Babylon. Every year, they called it a tribute to just say, hey, Babylon, don't invade us. We'll just keep sending you some money. And he decides one year he's going to stop sending Nebuchadnezzar some money. The prophet Jeremiah comes to Jehoiakim and basically says, this is a bad idea. They're going to overrun you. This is not what God wants you to do. Jeremiah tries to speak into his life, but Jehoiakim wants nothing of it. And so Jehoiakim stops sending the money, and it's perfectly predictable what was going to happen. Nebuchadnezzar comes and gets Jehoiakim. Nebuchadnezzar, I don't know if you know anything about ancient Near East history, but he was a brutal guy, as most kings were in the ancient Near East. And you know how you might collect like stamps or baseball cards or coins or something? Nebuchadnezzar collected kings from other countries. And what he would do is he'd get the kings from the other countries, he'd bring them to his country, he would gouge their eyes out, and then he would chain them up with one another and parade them in front of people all the time to remind people that he is the King of Kings. So Jehoiakim ends up in that parade. Jehoiakim's son, Jehoiachim, is 18 years old and now takes over the throne. Try to keep this short, basically makes dumb decisions that Jeremiah is suggesting against, and Jehoiakim's son, Jehoiachim, now also ends up in Nebuchadnezzar's collection of kings. Now, at this stage, you might think, I don't think I'd want to be the king of Judah. And yet, people are drawn to all kinds of things out of pride, out of their grid for decision making. And so Zedekiah becomes the next king. He's actually Jehoiachim's uncle. He's 21 years old when he becomes king. And Jeremiah also comes to him and warns him about basically getting on Nebuchadnezzar's bad side. Not only does he not listen, but this king, Zedekiah, has Jeremiah the prophet thrown into a pit so that he doesn't have to listen to him anymore. And the historian who's writing down about all this says this about Zedekiah. He says, he did evil in the eyes of the Lord his God and did not humble himself before Jeremiah the prophet, who spoke the word of the Lord. This is someone who was not at all interested in getting data that was uncomfortable, but true. He would not be humble. And so Zedekiah eventually also ended up in Nebuchadnezzar's king collection with his eyes poked out, paraded with his nephew and his brother. Later on, we get Jeremiah's writing. And Jeremiah is reflecting about all the things that he's seen as a prophet. And I got to tell you, if you ever read the book of Jeremiah in the Old Testament, you'll be able to see the world through your pastor's eyes and see how sometimes God is at work in amazing ways and people yield to him and they get on board with what God is doing and they try to honor him and life goes well and it's good for the world. And this is what prophets see. People who will not be honest with themselves, who have an agenda and are not going to let it be interrupted. And even though the truth is there to be seen, will not see it. And maybe in one of the most sad, but also honest verses that Jeremiah ever writes, this is what he says. The heart is deceitful above all else, above all things. He says, your heart and my heart and his heart, there's just something about it that's deceitful. You know, deceit is a little different than dishonesty. Deceit comes in the side door. It doesn't announce itself like dishonesty. Deceit is almost always a mix of truths and half-truths and falsehoods. It's almost always mixed in with a little bit of pride and a little bit of fatigue. It almost always has with it someone closing their eyes a little bit to stay on their own course. And Jeremiah comes to the conclusion about your heart and mine, that the heart is deceitful above all things, which should make us appropriately cautious about ever using the phrase, follow your heart. Follow your heart. People ask me, Greg, should I follow my heart? I'm like, well, tell me whether your heart's healthy or not. Tell me whether your heart's being honest with itself or not. Tell me whether the salesman is winning or whether the truth is winning. And then I'll be able to tell you whether to follow your heart, but do not blindly follow your heart because the heart is actually deceitful above all things. He goes on. And beyond cure. You were hoping for something a little more encouraging, weren't you? But the heart that's inside of you and the heart that's inside of me is not only deceitful, not only wants to go its own way and will justify its own actions. You know what people who are justifying are doing, right? They're actually just lying. Justifying is usually just a lying to yourself. And it's beyond cure, which doesn't actually mean it will kill you. It just means it will always be with you, and so you will constantly need to treat it for the rest of your life. There will never be a time when you can just let the heart go out on its own. It's beyond cure. But if it receives the treatment of honesty that doesn't sell itself all the time, that can change everything. He finishes this phrase by saying, so who can understand it? Who can understand it? So I want you to think about the decisions that are in front of you and the decisions that are behind you. And I want to ask you to ask the integrity question. Am I being honest with myself, really? A couple of months ago, I was sitting in a meeting with our elders, and there was a conversation happening between two elders, and I saw an interaction happen, and I thought, I respect that honesty. And so just for the next few minutes, I want you to hear the story of one of our elders and that conversation.
Right in the middle of that sentence. And I said, it's not true. I said, it's been this way pretty much for my whole career. I'm Rick Kidder, and I am a community group leader here at Suncrest and also one of the elders. And one of the processes that the elder team has is called a peer review. And it's a good process because it allows us to speak into each other's lives a little bit and encourage one another and sometimes to challenge each other. There's several questions that talk about things like priorities and that kind of thing. And, a lot of it, I was responding that, this year has been a challenge because I actually work for the Alzheimer's Association in Chicago, and I'm one of the senior finance folks. And we've been doing this massive project all across the country that I've been leading on a system change. So the time demands have just been really extreme. So the people around me started to pick up on this theme. And so here comes the question. So Rick, we've heard you talk a couple of times about how your work schedule is just so demanding. Is that normal for you? And I started to give the answer that is acceptable, the one that doesn't make me look too bad. Well, it's a season and, it's because of the intensity of this project and we've come a pretty long way with it. And I probably have to go a couple of more months at this pace and things will stabilize and then it'll get better. And I just literally stopped right in the middle of that sentence. And I said, it's not true. I said, it's been this way pretty much for my whole career, 30 plus years. And at what cost? Fortunately, I have a wife that is awesome and understanding, and I've got kids that love me, but it's taken a toll. And, God got my attention through that conversation with the elders, and just reflecting on it afterwards, I know that my struggle is I'm a workaholic. I've got a lot of my identity that is bound up in what I do for a living, and I more or less let my job take over my life. So since that conversation with the elders, I've taken some steps. One of those key steps was a conversation with my boss about boundaries. The very first step away from struggle and toward that full, abundant life that Jesus offers. Just be honest.
I want to ask each of you to really roll through the history of your mind right now and think about the last time you were stopped almost mid-sentence while you were saying something. And you had to acknowledge, actually what I just said, it's not true. It's a story that I tell about myself. It's a story that I exaggerate. I say it this way, but what just came out of my mouth, it's not true. And if you have a group of people you trust around you, which is just a tremendous gift in this human life to process that with, that's one thing. But I actually want to ask every one of you who is here and everyone watching online to go through a practice this week where you literally stand in front of a mirror. And when you stand in front of the mirror and you look at yourself alone in front of the mirror, I want you to think through your life and what you're facing and what might be next with these questions in mind. Why did I do that? Really? Why didn't I do that? Really? Why do I do this really? Why am I really? And I want to ask you right now to start to picture yourself, start to envision it, at what stage this week you'll stand in front of the mirror. And I'm going to read a whole list of practical questions, some of which will apply to you and some of which won't. They're just a grid, and maybe you need to jot some notes because your question might be in here. For the experience you could have standing in front of a mirror and say, am I being honest with myself? Really? So let me just read this long list of questions. You might ask, why am I avoiding him? Really? Why am I procrastinating? Really? Why did I say yes? Really? What was going on inside of me? Why did I say no? Really? Why did I choose to wear this? Really? Why did I not admit it? Really? Why am I moving out? Really? Or why am I moving in? Really? Why do I spend so much time in the garage or in the basement or at work? Really? Why don't I express my feelings? Really? Why do I drive the car that I drive? Why am I pulled toward pornography? Why do I hang out with that group of people? Really? Why do I comment on other people's things? Why did I sleep with her? Why did I leave him? Why didn't I stop to help? Really? Why didn't I stop to help? Why do I push my kids toward fill in the blank? Toward athletics, toward college, toward money, toward God? Why do I push my kids toward what I push them to? Really? What drives me? Really? Why do I let fear win? Why do I let fear win? Just be honest about it. Why do I avoid awkwardness? Why did I get fired? Really? I was having a conversation with a friend of mine today. He's a pastor who 2 months ago was fired from the church he was serving. And when I was talking to him today, he told me that he has spent the last 8 weeks trying to be honest about how it got to that point, including his part. And my respect for him went off the charts. Why do I exaggerate, really? What was my part? Really? You find a time this week to look yourself in the mirror. Literally stand in front of the mirror and say, am I being honest with myself? Really? Because here's the decision that comes out of this question. I will not lie to myself, even when the truth is uncomfortable. And my friends, this discomfort, that leads you toward rigorous honesty is the beginning of a question that leads to a great decision that leads to a great life. It is the first of 5. And I ask for you to let it guide you.
Before you turn off this video, hit the like, subscribe, and share buttons. We'll see you next week, same time, same channel. And until then, go and be the church.